everyone, and welcome you to today's webinar. My name is Viktoria Soltesz, and I'm the founder of the Soltesz Institute. As you know, payments and banking affect every aspect of your organization. It affects your customer experience, it affects data security, and of course, compliance, because all businesses need to comply with different rules and regulations. But the question is that who is making all of these rules? And in this ever-changing environment, how can we keep up to date with the latest regulations, with the latest trends, and of course, the latest requirements? So that's why I have the leading professionals to answer all those questions. So today's topic is Georgia as part of international compliance environment. And I think Georgia needs a lot of attention nowadays because Georgia is, even though it's not part of the EU yet, it has a lot of innovation. The banks are very friendly towards businesses. The taxation environment is absolutely excellent. And they also introduced SEPA, which is the single euro payment area. With the euro payments, there could be a lot of good opportunities for fintech companies, financial institutions to get incorporated in Georgia and take advantage of the great taxes and the good business environment there. So Ketevan is here today with us to discuss everything around Georgia as an international compliance environment. And she's going to discuss what are the latest trends, what are the different banking licenses, financial licenses are in Georgia, what regulation means for businesses and financial institutions. So welcome, Katie, and thank you so much for accepting to share your wisdom here today. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself, more about the company, what you represent, and how did you end up in this compliance department, what you are doing and how you're doing it?
Good day, everyone, and good morning for you, people in Europe. My name is Ketevani, and thank you, Victoria, for inviting me to this webinar. I work and I'm partner of IBCCS Tax, which is a tax and finance and legal company. We are providing local and international taxation advisory for business and for private entrepreneurs as well. This is the story which started several years ago, and since I'm the finance person for people doing business, doing finances, this is the primary and key point for them to work with banks and to have banking opportunity. So this is very important challenge and issue and benefit. So therefore we decided to have proper service opportunities for people, for clients like we have. The foreign people, local people does not have as many, doesn't need as much assistance, but however the people who work and who live in Georgia, nomads or the businesses who wants to have proper business in Georgia, they really need to have proper guidance for them to smoothly run the business and to have a smooth flow of their funds.
I understand. And how did you end up in compliance? What's your personal journey? Did you started as a lawyer and then, compliance just fall on your lap as it happens usually? Or you always were interested in corporate law and the compliance?
For me, and because I had tax background and finance background, and our clients are there, our primary education here was, of course, the law and finances for me, for both, because of taxation. But I worked and I was interested for this regulation because in every cases, whenever we are talking finances, we need tax and knowledge of AML regulation. So, and also because there are several types of regulatory and body in Georgia in terms of local regulations and for international regulations as well. So we need to have proper knowledge about it and proper service as well, because recently Georgia is having more and more regulations, but it doesn't mean that it shortens and narrows the capability for business to have business, but mostly to regulate the business, to have proper standards, to have more certainty for business. So therefore, finally, it appeared that we are in line of my primary experience and knowledge in taxes. It appears that I was needed to have proper education and knowledge of international compliance standards and AML regulation. Therefore, we learned including I had some trainings in OECD as well, and even though until now in Georgia, not many companies are doing these services, and not many companies are following the AML legislation because it's not even very popular. Of course, since last year, when some government bodies started to regulate even the accounting of companies and auditors to comply with the regulations as an authority to supervise businesses, and they started also the campaign to educate people, even though we are following for more compliance for even banking sector as well, and for any other type of services, because there are categories of service providers which needs this regulation. So if for now, these regulations are applicable mostly for banks, and since last year for several institutions of Georgia, like accounting firms, real estate providers, etc. So since we are international company and our clients are from abroad and from many other countries, we are needed to comply international standards. So therefore, it appeared that we started to have these rules, and then we started to have this knowledge of those AML legislation. And finally, I'm here to discuss it with you.
What a journey. Thank you very much for sharing this with us. Usually what we have is we discuss questions from the audience. Today is going to be the same. We collected a couple of questions from the audience before the webinar started. So these are the questions that we are going to go through. So the first question is that how does Georgia's regulatory framework align with global compliance standards? And it's global, international, but also maybe we can highlight a bit on the EU harmonization as well, since we are going to talk about the SEPA implementation as well. So how does Georgia's regulatory framework is harmonized globally, EU-wise, and with other countries as well?
Thank you, Victoria, for that important question. One of the most critical aspects of global compliance is combating money laundering and terrorist financing. Georgia has reinforced anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing network framework to align with international standards. We have several standards of it, which is FATF, which is Financial Action Task Force, the global body that establishes AML CTF regulation, European Union AML directives, and MoneyWheel, the Council of Europe's monitoring body for AML compliance. So to enhance compliance and to prevent financial crime, Georgia have implemented several important measures, such as law facility the prevention of money laundering. I would say too that some people say that, it's getting a stricter regulation, it's getting stricter in Georgia. However, I really do not agree for those people, and I believe that regulation is more coming in Georgia. Several years ago, we even did not have CRS, but for now, they are starting to regulate that people, and the country itself was attractive for European investors and for foreign people. So as we need to align with the European standards, even though it's not as strict as in Europe for now and in many other developed countries. However, it's also standardized that people and the banks were willing, and financial institutions are willing to cooperate with Georgian financial institutions. So Georgia is adapting new-style payment system rules to support fintech innovation while ensuring compliance with security regulation. After several reforms, Georgia is ranked in one of the top in ease of doing business as a one of the friendly and most business-friendly country in a region. I want to highlight that Georgia has established those rules and those regulations, but those regulations are in line with European standard, but is not as strict as in Europe. For example, in Germany, it's nothing to compare to it, but it's standardized in order that we are also acceptable for regulations and for European banks and European financial institutions, in order the businesses had more availability in Georgia to work smoothly.
You think it's a benefit or a problem that the regulations are not as strict as Europe? Because at one point, of course, it makes it easier for companies and financial institutions. But in the same time, if it's not that strict, what is the payout on that not being that strict? What are we losing here?
Here, I don't think that we are losing here. Moreover, we gain more, because I don't agree when people say that when regulation is not on place is good. Of course, we need some regulation, we need some framework, and this is good when we have one. But having more regulation, many regulation, is really bad, because when there are so many regulations, business are really hampered. And I think that Europe sees it on themselves, and a lot of European companies and even individuals are choosing to move somewhere else, because when there are so many regulations, there is no space for improvement. And so to have new ideas, to have innovations. For now, we have more framework than too many regulations, and it's really benefit for us and for all of the people who are in touch and businesses who want to work in Georgia. So they are well acknowledged countries, and the system is well acknowledged to work and to be in line with international standards. However, there is a lot of room for improvement. So of course, it's a benefit for a country, and a lot of people should benefit with that.
I understand, because we had a lot of clients as well who came to us with great innovation, and the problem is that the bank simply just does not understand these, and they're really afraid of the regulator, that they will lose the financial license, they get the penalty. So of course they might hinder innovation just because of the over-regulated environment. So I can completely understand that where could be the benefit of Georgia of not over-regulating, overburdening these companies with these extreme regulatory framework. And as you said, very right, a lot of businesses are unfortunately leaving Europe because of the high taxation, because of the choking regulatory. But let's say that, what are the biggest compliance challenges for businesses in Georgia? What do you think that, even though it's looser than Europe, as you said, although it's keeping the main idea of like fighting money laundering and of course terrorist financing, but what are the biggest still compliance challenges for businesses who go to the region?
Yeah, that's very important. I would say here is this AML topic, as I mentioned in the beginning, is not very well developed in Georgia until now. Of course, mostly banks has developed it, and banks are complying and trying to be compliant in international regulation. However, I would say the challenge itself is the knowledge about it, and one is knowledge that not many people have knowledge about the AML regulations, and the expectations of foreign people that there is zero regulation on it, so they can just simply go to that. Of course, Georgia is quite flexible in terms of opening bank accounts. So a lot of any individual, except several countries which are restricted and everyone knows it, except of the citizens of them, any individual can open bank account in Georgia. So of course, this is much flexibility than in many other countries, and it's opportunity for them to have a bank account in Georgia, in Georgian banks, which is fully licensed of National Bank of Georgia. Business should know bank will require information about the company's, for example, source of funds. So they need to show the banks the funds are legit and they don't come from crime. They need to understand that this is international standard, I would say minimum standard, to comply to the banking regulations. This is mostly for from financial and AML perspective, but I would highlight some more, which might be tax challenge as well. So because it's some kind of compliance challenge, maybe not only for banking side, but of course tax regulation side. Because for some people in Georgia, because the country is under development until now and does not have a long story of being a self-sustained individual country. And because business is developing so fast, they need to align legislation for that. So some legislation, including financial legislation, tax legislation, is changing quite fast. So it's also sometimes complexity, and it occurs uncertainty for the businesses, and especially for foreign businesses, and they are a bit of scary for that. However, I can easily say that if they are with proper advisor and have proper local advisor, they should not be worried about this challenge, and it should not be that challenge. For example, recently, since last year, country introduced new law about the licensing of, for example, the PSPs and crypto licensing. Of course, it's really easy to comply if you have proper requirements, if you have proper director, proper UBO and everything. But people knew that they did not need any licenses. So when you have those changing, I think it's for people expect that there should not be anything, and this changing and transitional period is a bit of challenge for them. But if people are working properly and trying to have proper company, the legislation changes is not as strict and as difficult to comply. So I would say the transition period was not as easy, but still it's quite capable for them, and they don't have much burden or much cost. Recently, Georgia also introduced a GDPR regulation, but of course, compliant to compare it European standard, this is nothing close, including even labor regulations. The only need is that they need to be careful, they need to be ready, that there might be, and they need proper and timely advice that they need to adapt to these regulations. So these challenges is just challenges for a while, once there is something new enacted, but still all of them are capable to comply for them.
Yes, as they say that if you have nothing to hide, then you've got nothing to worry about, right? It's just an administration burden, because you should have the paperwork anyway. You should know where the source of funds is coming from. So if you have nothing to hide, then it shouldn't be really hard to prove. And as you said, it's not just for banking regulation, but even I assume for you to accept the client, you do a due diligence on the client as well, as all the businesses should do as well. So it's not just for the banks, but for doing business overall. And I think this is very important because, as you said, that the regulation is becoming global. We are all fighting financial creativity and tax avoidance and all of those creative ways when businesses are trying to cheat their way out of that. We mentioned that how regulation is affecting the companies, but what do you think? What are the biggest compliance challenges for banks and financial institutions and payment providers and exchanges and investment companies and everyone who is under the financial license in Georgia? Because I'm sure that they have much more regulation to adhere to.
Yes. In Georgia, we have around 11 financial types of financial licenses. And as I said, that there are a lot of different varieties. Banks have their own licensing. So banks and financial institutions in Georgia face significant compliance challenges as they align with global regulatory standards. So while they also need to comply with legal requirements, local ones. This is challenge, I would say, because of this AML and CFT regulations. So they need to have this risk management frameworks and digital transformation requirements. I think that one of the most pressing compliance issue is AML compliance, as Georgia needs to meet financial and EU standards at the same time, and financial institutions must implement strict customer due diligence and transaction monitoring. In our practice, we had such kind of challenge when one country's the challenges, maybe even US, do not require all the information which maybe European countries and our standard needs to comply. And it's one of the key challenge I would highlight, because sometimes when you don't have comparison and compliance to these requirements, that in one country, one company might have proper banking account, but not in Georgia, for example, even though these companies in their own country have the accounts, but Georgian standards, which is also should need to be in line with European regulation, they cannot give access to the bank account to another company because of these several regulations. So in this case, I think this is a problem for Georgian banking sector in particular, because this is not in compliance. Also, for other financial institutions like micro, like even PSP, sometimes for them it's a bit different to difficult, especially because until now they were not get too used to it, that there were regulations that they meet all the requirements, and sometimes it might happen that if they do not very carefully examine the law, they might not comply exact standards. They don't have exact guidance for particular regulation, and in that case the regulatory body has their variance and availability to decide up to their own judgment. So this is the only case when it's better you had very strict and detailed guidance. However, these cases are very rare, and in most cases it's better to have just a framework rather than regulation. So it's the country we need to balance innovation with compliance. I think consumer protection regulations and fair lending practices are becoming more stringent as well, because National Bank of Georgia has issued regulations to prevent predatory lending, misleading financial advertising, and unfair contract terms. This is, I would say that this is more not challenge, but even benefit, maybe not for banks itself, but in terms of customers, and because customers need to be protected in the first place. So in summary, banks and financial institutions Georgia face some compliance challenges due to the AML and CFT regulations, as well as Basel requirements. Also, they need to comply with data protection, but in this case, banks are a bit more beneficial regime than standard companies. Georgian banks so much developed nowadays that it's really not difficult to comply for any standards, and nowadays they have so much convenient, for example, internet banking, convenient services. Even people can have private bankers in any bank with quite small amount of fees, and they are very helpful, and service standard is quite high in Georgia. Georgian banks started to be even technological companies, so all of these regulations is not as difficult as for other financial institutions. However, they are getting more reliable for customers. So these regulations is a bit, maybe they have some more costs for to run the business, but however, they are also so much reliable for customer side, because as much regulated they are, customers trust them more.
And also, I think the regulation is not only for the regulator itself that regulates you, but also for your partners, right? For the correspondent accounts, for the intermediary accounts, for all of those channels that you're working with. Oftentimes, we see that even though that locally the regulator would allow you to do this or not do that, but the partner is requiring you to have certain kind of rules in place, right?
Exactly, because it's a lot of times. Therefore, I mentioned that sometimes Georgia needs to comply not only even one particular transaction might need to comply not only Georgian standard, but sometimes even US. So time to time they need to comply all of the standards, because when you transfer money, for example, in USD, does not matter even if the transaction is local. These transactions should pass US bank account and they need to comply with US standard. If you transfer money in euro, then the money should pass European banks. Unless Georgia financial institutions have proper compliance standard, they are not reliable for the partners to pass the transaction, and they cannot pass the transaction at all. So the compliance standards we have is mostly because to be reliable partners for foreign banks, to have proper transactions and money flows in Georgian banks and to Georgian banks are smooth and it happens in time. So because they are so much reliable, you can transfer USD, euro in a day, on the same day, even if it's not SEPA transaction. So I think this is a big comfort for customer and big benefit for them.
I understand. And you mentioned also the technological aspect, that all the companies now, all the big banks become now tech companies. And this is the trend that we see internationally, that all the fin companies become fintech companies now, just to provide a good service for the clients, right?
Georgian banks, especially big banks, GOG, Bank of Georgia, and TBC Bank, which are also listed in UK Stock Exchange, they are like innovation. They are doing innovations. Their interfaces in internet bank they have and mobile bank they have so much easy to comply. You can do all the transaction with a mobile bank. Moreover, they are financing technological institutions. They are financing startups. They are giving education. They are financing degrees outside Georgia. So they started to become fintech company. They are financing all the innovations in countries. So Georgians and even foreign people can learn. They can do business with them and even sometimes mentored by them. So Georgian banks are not just banks to transact the money. So they are with people. They are promoting education, financial education to run the business. So to have knowledge and information about taxation, innovation. So they try to promote business in Georgia and to promote to have availability and access to the foreign markets for businesses. And because they know that if as much business is successful, they can also benefit with successful clients, and even it's better for them. So they are even technological company, fintech company, and sometimes even developers.
And it's good to learn that education is the key in every way, right? For the fintech development, for the technology, for the compliance.
It's a boom in Georgia. Yes, TBC Bank have their free educational courses. BOG have their free education courses. So you apply, you pass the very simple exam or standards, and you are in line to be educated. And the people who are passing and finishing and graduating those courses are, of course, that there are a lot of demand for tech people. So you know that right away you will have a very competent job.
Amazing. We are going to discuss all those links as well. We are going to attach those links to this webinar as well. So whoever wants to check out more information about the trainings and education in Georgia. So I think it will be very beneficial. You mentioned that there are 11 different type of financial licenses in Georgia. Can you tell us a bit more? Because our next question is that what type of financial licenses do we have in Georgia? So I assume it's the bank, is the insurance, is the payment service provider, e-money institutions, but what else? What other kind of licenses we have?
Banks, of course, banking license, micro organizations, microfinance organization license. This is not a bank, but some of them, after time to time, when they increase, they can comply to the banking license as well. Credit union license, they are cooperative financial institutions that provide savings and loan services to the members. EMIs, of course, electric money institutions, security market license, which is starting to be very popular in Georgia and promoted by National Bank of Georgia. Insurance license, as you mentioned, leasing and factoring licensing and currency exchange licenses, crowdfunding and P2P lending licenses, loan issuer licensing. So we have a lot of variety of licenses in terms of finances. So all of these companies and all of these services are regulated National Bank of Georgia in order to the customers are protected. I would highlight that e-banks are also very popular, and even Paysera, very popular and well-known company, has also gained Georgian licenses, and they are providing SEPA transactions as well. So in Georgia, there are a variety of services which a business can do, and they are very much promoted.
Wow. And I assume that there are different share capital for each, different requirements for director. I assume everybody needs a local director, local anti-money laundering officer, right? Or is there any very particular difference between these licenses that you think it's good to mention?
Of course. Yes, of course, the most strictly regulated is banking and microfinance as well, and also insurance, because they are very big companies. They need to provide loans and credit facility. They can issue payment instruments, so they need to comply very strict way. So they need to obtain banking license, and an institution must meet capital requirements, risk management criteria, and AML compliance. But for microfinance is not as much as difficult and as well credit unions, because it's much easier to comply, and also they have much narrow capabilities as well, because they can grant small scale loans to individuals and businesses, and they can also have little deposit. I would also highlight PSPs. This is quite demanding the license, because payment service providers are facilitate electronic payments and digital transactions. They need to meet security, anti-fraud, AML and CFT requirements to ensure safe transactions. This is quite easy license, and many companies, including local and foreigner, try to comply to get this license. They need to have director. It's not mandatory to have local director in any situations. But there is a big however and big but, which is a director is required. In case there is one director, then in one shareholder and director, then this person should have education. They should not be suspicious in crime. And in that case, they can comply. We don't have any special regulation about local one, but in practice, we see that there is needed to have local director, which are well known for the banks, or bank can make good background check. So we always advise to the clients that when having a company in Georgia, especially if they want to have a licensed activity, they need better to have a local director in Georgia. We already have EMIs, and they are running business not only in Georgia market but also in foreign countries. So they provide payment services, as we know, digital wallets, prepaid cards, online payment systems, and it's getting very popular. And they also need to comply as a risk management like banks, but capital reserves and AML CFT regulations, but of course not as strict and as high standards as banks. And I also would highlight FX exchange licenses, because until now we had only land-based FX finances, and people could go to the FX store to be able to exchange money in Georgia, or they needed to exchange money only in bank, which is a bit expensive. And for now, already several companies started to have online license, even though this is funny that there does not exist exchange for a fixed online license separately, but you need to take normal standard license for land using, but you can make transact money from any bank to make foreign exchange transaction online, and you will return money back on your bank account in very minutes with much better beneficial exchange rate.
Nice. And I assume that all of these licenses, or majority of the licenses, can cater for international clientele, right? So you don't have that restricted regulatory framework, like, for example, in Europe, that the European banks can only cater for European clients, and therefore there is an area limitation. Because the whole idea would be that the foreign capital flows into Georgia, incorporates a financial company, get the financial license, and then cater for the whole world. Am I right here?
Of course, unless money is clean and there is not any fraud, international money can freely flow in Georgia, and moreover, it's even so much recommended. And we face transactions and transfers from around the world. Even as I mentioned, foreign people can open their own bank account in Georgia, and they can make transactions else anywhere in the world. So they can work in those internet bank from their smartphones and from their laptops, so they can easily use it.
Of course. I think we didn't address the elephant in the room, which is the crypto. So what's happening with the crypto regulation? How is Georgia regulating crypto? What are the licenses? What are the allowances? What are the restrictions? What's good? What's bad?
Yeah, this is very interesting topic, and we have, I think, well, as I remember, it's 121 ATMs in Georgia. Can you imagine the number of ATMs we have? It's even more than any European countries ATM have. So it means that it's quite well used and quite popular. We don't have much regulation in case of crypto, because we have one regulation in terms of National Bank of Georgia about transaction. So we have time to time, maybe once in several years, such kind of important regulations. But it just said that if you are exchanging crypto, you just need VASP license. So it means that it started to be regulated, but it's very easy to comply for that. Also, it says that you need to use special transaction regime if you want to pay, because it's not welcome to pay by crypto, but there are some interesting companies in Georgia who are doing crypto exchange, and if you apply through them, you can properly make payments through crypto. So very good news for individuals that profit from crypto is exempted. So physical persons, if they are trading through crypto, they do not pay any taxes for them, so they are exempted. But for corporations, this is standard revenue, and they need to pay tax only in case they distribute dividends. It's a bit not about crypto itself, it's all about profit taxation in Georgia, that companies do not pay taxes when they have profit. They can keep it in money, they can reinvest this money, so it's tax-free unless they distribute dividend. And the same rules is applied for crypto. When they have profit from crypto, they can invest this money for something else, and they can pay taxes only when they distribute dividend. This is general evaluation from my side about crypto.
Yeah, I think the on-ramp and off-ramp is a problem for everyone, really, because even then you have a EU-regulated crypto exchange. Finding a bank is always a challenge, because banks just simply do not want to take the responsibility for any kind of wrongdoing. So I don't think that Georgia is unique in this case. The banking is always a challenge for crypto companies. But what do you think? How will
they have crypto account?
They have, right? So
Yes.
it's harder to get. So it's not something that you can walk into the bank and just open an account. Any account.
If you are licensed and if you get the license, in that case, you can have bank account. So if you are in compliant of the standard of, for example, crypto licensing, then you're welcome to have.
Nice. Okay, that's clear. Okay, this is a definite good news for the crypto exchanges then, because the banking is always the problem, right? The payments and the banking and the on-ramp and the off-ramp and the payouts for the customers or accepting deposits from the customers, that usually is the main headache for crypto exchanges. So it's definitely good to know. Let's talk about a bit on SEPA as well. So the next question is about how will the SEPA implementation change anything? We already have the SEPA implementation in Georgia, but what do you think? Companies are going to be affected by it? Is the economy going to boost because of the SEPA and the instant payments coming with that? What do you think?
Of course, as a short answer, of course, it's good for country to have SEPA since it's single euro payment area, and it helps and smoothes the transactions between European countries. But of course, there might be a bit some challenges, and I will review that part as well. So in general, implementation of SEPA in Georgia will bring significant changes, particularly in the way of cross-border transactions. Transferring euros between Georgia and SEPA member states can be cumbersome. They need to have often required to have multiple intermediaries, and so it increases the fees and it's processing of time, because the money should pass one kind of bank account, so they will make some charges for them, and then another, and also the local one. Sometimes it takes 2 days, even if they don't know the company, if they don't know the contract, and it's also quite costly because we use it a lot of time and it's really costly for the companies. However, with the adoption of SEPA, euro payments between Georgia and participant countries will become faster, cheaper, and more streamlined. So direct transfers will be possible. It will eliminate the need of intermediary banks and reduce transaction fees. But however, in this, because Georgia will also need to strengthen consumer protection laws and enhance overall banking oversight. Moreover, I would say that SEPA will help to modernize Georgia's financial ecosystem, and it will increase the flow of money and make it faster. And it will help Georgia to be more integrated in European Union.
Definitely. And it's going to increase trust as well between Europe and Georgia as well, because when we are talking about instant payments, then we don't have to wait days for the money to arrive. You can immediately pay suppliers or even receive money or send money to and from Europe. So that's definitely going to boost the availability and the trust in the area, I think, because the major problem, what we see outside of Europe, that it goes through the SWIFT system, it's burdensome, it goes through different banks, then the currency gets exchanged. There are very high fees. So it is very hard to do business with non-European countries through the SEPA, Georgia.
Yes, and it will also increase competition between companies, yes. And it might help to have more companies, more institutions, and more transactions.
And that's definitely good for us, for consumers, because more competition means that they are fighting for our well-being. So that's definitely increasing the level of the products and services.
Yes, it's good for consumers and it's good for business because it promotes their growth. It promotes that they need to be more innovative. They need to be a more advanced level. And finally, it also helps them as well. So it's both sides. It's better for everyone.
For sure. So what do you think? Is there something that we haven't discussed that we should have discussed? Or is there anything that you want to add to this before we close down?
I think we had quite interesting discussion about the financial compliance and AML compliance of Georgia, but let me resume something about Georgia and about Georgian AML compliance itself. It's still on the way of development, and I think the most interesting time of the country, especially in Europe, in many other countries where we face a lot of regulations, a lot of standards everywhere, and it's wherever you go, you face challenges in terms of banking, opening banking account, in case of transactions. So in Georgia, the country is doing and is working, the government is working to streamline, to simplify the processes, to make it efficient, to make it easier for everyone to comply and to work, because they also create the environment to increase the trust. Even though Georgia have some regulations in AML regulations, CFT regulations, and some other, finally, still there is a lot of room for improvement. There is a lot of room for development, and a lot of countries and a lot of businesses are interested to have business from Georgia or to set up the connections with Georgians in order to improve the chances that the companies could have a lot of benefits, and to simplify their business, to have a lot of connectivity with the world, the West or East, and make business in Georgia.
Nice. So the future is definitely bright for the region. It's good to hear. Where do we find you if someone wants to ask more questions or have any comments? Where do we find you? Obviously, we put your email address on the screen, but what's the best way? LinkedIn, or reach out to you through the company?
Everywhere. I would say everywhere. You can Google me as well, but of course, IBCCS Tax is an international company. So you can find me either through IBCCS, I'm on the website, or on email, or LinkedIn as well is available. I'm also posting about the legislation, about taxation, and other topics which might be interesting for clients, for businesses, for entrepreneurs, because I'm also entrepreneur. So you can reach me everywhere, on my mail, on my WhatsApp, and we also have free consultations, for 20-minute consultations for people who are interested about Georgia and the benefits they can get and availability they can have, because it appears that not many people knows how easy it is to set up business in Georgia. So people can set up business in Georgia in a day. So you can legally, if you have proper documentation, set up the business in a day. So I'm glad to have consultation about tax benefits, about the AML topics, and about banking as well. So feel free to contact me on LinkedIn, on mail, on WhatsApp, wherever you feel free.
Fantastic. And I would really like to encourage everyone to do so, because that's the only way that we can bring a more ethical and transparent industry, talk about banks, talk about the problems, talk about the everyday issues and the solution for that together. So thank you so much, Ketevani, to be here with us and share all your wisdom. And I'm really, really looking forward meeting you again. And thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank for attention for everyone who watched it. I hope it was interesting.
It was indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.